Sheikh Abdul Hakeem is an academic who has been actively involved in numerous initiatives in the UK over the past 4 decades. He is currently the Sheikh Zayed Lecturer of Islamic Studies at Cambridge University and is also the founder of Cambridge Muslim College. He has provided the vision for the decade-long project to build the Cambridge Central Mosque, Europe's first eco-mosque. Now, please join me in welcoming Sheikh Abdul Hakeem Murad, all the way from Cambridge, England.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen. Wala udwana illa ala zalimin. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Al Malikul Haqqul Mubin. Muhammadur Rasulullah. Sadiqul Wa'dil Amin. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. It's great to be here, however, virtually at this really amazing event, reviving the Islamic spirit, and I'm hugely grateful to the organizers and the facilitators and honored to have been invited yet again. What I want to talk about is really a reflection on something I heard a very long time ago. The man who coached me through my first little surahs, the basic 10 surahs which the Tablighi Jamaat makes sure that everybody must know, was a man called Hafiz Patel, who has now moved on to his no doubt great reward, but in the early 80s was coordinating the activities of Tabligh from the then Christian Street Markaz in Tower Hamlets in East London, where I spent quite a lot of time and learnt quite a lot. He used to say that the main obstacle for the flowering of Muslims in the West and for their onward progress to their truly manifest destiny as upholders of the final kalima is that we have not yet quite got to the bridge where we change the niyyah. Niyyah is one of the important points for the Jama'ah. The first hadith of Islam that comes right at the beginning of Sahih al-Bukhari, and which has to be there because an-niyyah matiyah, the intention is the riding beast on the basis of which you get places. Without intention, there's no significant action. We are our intentions, in a sense. The first hadith of Islam is actions are by intentions. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. I think this was the first time I ever heard this hadith. Everything was fresh and new and amazing. And whoever's hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger, فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. His hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ امْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِحُهَا فَهِجْرَتُهُ لِمَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. And whoever's migration is for some worldly thing or for some woman whom he wishes to marry, then his hijrah is for that to which he is migrating. It's very subtly put, it's very short, it's one of those condensed hadiths that kind of you feel you want to pull the cord and like a life vest it becomes enormous. There's so much to unpack in it. But Hafiz Patel's point when he was discoursing on niyyah is that we Muslims in the West are here for products and services, by and large, to improve our circumstances. But Allah wishes us to be here for Allah and His Messenger, which means da'wah. In other words, tabligh, this work of tabligh, calling people to the haqq, without which there is only batil and human suffering. بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. By the remembrance of Allah, hearts are made peaceful. In this age of uproar, of anxiety, of depression, of antidepressant prescriptions doubling in the UK in the last 10 years, we have all of this stuff and all of this status, and we rule the world, but still we are anxious and unsettled. Our hearts are not at rest. It has to be dhikrullah, the remembrance of Allah. That's another of the Tablighi principles. So he would spin this narrative for me and says, we will start to thrive as a community and become at the head of the caravan rather than tagging along anxiously at the back trying to jump on board when we make this change in niyyah. So the niyyah for being here is not dunya, but the niyyah for being here is da'wah, which immediately turns us into individuals, truly following the footsteps of the chosen one, alayhi salatu wassalam. This was also brought home to me by Sheikh Salman al-Auda. We knew each other a bit. We were part of a committee together at a university, where he was giving me some reflections on my grumbling about the state of Muslim minorities in the West, saying, all you have to do, rectify your intention, follow this hadith, and you will see what doors will open. But unless the intention is clear and singular, unless there is ikhlas, these are all good Tablighi principles, you won't really get anywhere, and your communities will continue to be in this state of sort of confusion and dysfunction. So this occurred to me quite recently when I was thinking about the mindset that some of us have, myself included. That because of this dysfunction, the sense that we're at the back of the caravan and struggling, we are not really in a position to engage in this tabligh and this da'wah. And only if we have this restored niyyah for Allah and His Messenger is anything going to change. And instead, because we're still confused about the niyyah and what could be more noble than calling the world to Rabb al-Alameen, it's a high thing to which we are summoned. It's the essence of the prophetic task. It's the last commandment that we were given by the Holy Prophet alayhi salatu salam in his khutbah al-wida', in his final khutbah, this tabligh. If we stop looking for excuses and start looking for ways out of our mess, so much of our discourse is blaming this person, blaming that person, this government, that government, the British Raj, the French in Algeria. We're always exculpating ourselves and finding excuses for our miserable situation by finding others to blame. In most cases, that is correct, in that those others are very often to blame. But that's a kind of sociological, psychological response. We feel less bad about ourselves because we can blame others. The others are very often to blame. And yet this endless attitude of victimhood isn't a good foundation for moving forwards. It's an interpretation of what happened in the past that caused our current trauma. What we really want is some way of viewing things that allows us to move forwards, and victimhood is not a good basis for an agenda for a different condition. So instead we look, and when you're in Islamic studies like me, you cruise the libraries and you find this book and that book, and our ummah is extraordinarily prolific and gifted with so many texts. You find that you're always brought back to the essential things and to the real solutions by finding the essence of things in the Quran and the Hadith. So this Hadith of niyyah is something that we all need to cultivate constantly. Always check your niyyah. Muhasabah, this virtue commanded by the Holy Prophet, calling oneself to account, is about checking one's niyyah. So that's a constant obligation. And when we say we're here not for goods and services, but here for Allah and His Messenger, certain things will change in our hearts and will change in those who surround us. And we'll stop, I think, a lot of our blaming and finding excuses and see how can we discharge this duty of tabligh and this da'wah. looking around us at people rather not in a sense of how can we criticize them because we feel inadequate, but rather how can we help them because they're spiritually confused and in this state of universal anxiety. How can we help? The Quran is sent rahmatun wa shifa, a mercy and a healing. Therefore, its followers should be merciful and healing. Otherwise, they're not holding it correctly. How can we present ourselves not as beneficial to an expanding, diversified economy, but as useful in terms of solving or resolving the heart sickness that so many people say they experience in the midst of the modern plenty? So this has to be the next stage. And the success and the ongoing viability of our communities, I think, is going to depend on whether we can do this clearly or not, whether we transcend the grumbling and the correct diagnosing of the reasons, the practical, worldly reasons for our current misfortune, and start to look ahead and start to see how we can start helping people. So in my latest publication, the little book Travelling Home, one of the things that I've been struggling with in the book is how to change the discourse so that we can see ourselves as being physicians, as healers, applying first aid to a civilization that has everything except what humanity has always taken to be indispensable. The indigenous inhabitants of Canada, the Cree, the Algonquin, and the others didn't have goods and services and access to modern health care or passports or anything. And yet they did have what is indispensable, which is remembering the Great Spirit and understanding the fundamentally important things in life: family, tribe, relationship, truth, seeing the world as the outpouring of the creative beauty of the Great Spirit. They had that, but now the people who have taken their lands have lost that, but have everything else in superabundance. So adopting this rather radical, truly rather than superficially or rhetorically radical perspective, coming as healers, is, I think, a precondition for turning around the situation of our communities and giving us a clear rather than a kind of guilt-laden sense of why we are here. Now, the Quran is an address to all of us, but its primal address, of course, was to the chosen one, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. And the Holy Prophet, who had the message of Tawheed in the purest, unsurpassable form, and was offering it to people who were really at the opposite end of the religious spectrum, being stuck in their Jahiliyyah and their 300 or so deities, their honor code, offering it to them in this kind of primordial example of light and darkness, truth and falsehood. It's a great cosmic drama. That the Holy Prophet ﷺ was not heard by most of his people. And this is also our problem. When we proclaim the truth, we find that we're not readily heard. And we need to figure out whose fault that is. Is it because we are not conveying it correctly? Or is it because out of their egotism and ignorance and outraged pride, they can't hear it? This is the key question for tabligh. Is it in the conveyor or in the one to whom it is conveyed? It can't be in what is conveyed, because this is from Rabb al-Alameen in its shining perfection, the fullness of monotheism, the perfection of the pillars. What could be easier to convey to starving human hearts in this confusion, this jungle of materialist modernity that so many people are suffering in? So